Hello, I am Willow Tree, and thank you for listening to my first audio reading of An Airport Tragedy. Mind you, I am not a professional, nor do I have professional equipment. You may hear sounds in the background, or I may pause during the story. I also will come up with my own voices, which I will try to remember throughout the story, but they may slightly change or vary. I hope you enjoy this reading of An Airport Tragedy. Chapter 1. I Am Dead. She woke up in a strange way. She wasn't lying down in her bed, and there wasn't sunlight shining through her supposed to be blackout curtains. The light that hit her eyes wasn't the sun at all. It was an unnatural light. All of her senses felt crowded and muffled, so she decided she should focus on her own self first, before trying to remember where she was. And that's when her legs realized she was standing, and not in fact sitting or laying down, causing her to lose balance and begin falling backwards. Then her brain took control of her legs and started doing everything it could to keep her from falling, and after a few flailing steps and waving arms, she reached her goal of regained balance. Of course, that didn't last long, as a pain hit the center of her right thigh, and another on her left shoulder, and a third in between her breasts. She fell to the ground, letting out screams of pain as she closed her eyes and blocked out what little muffled sounds she could hear, so that she could find out what in the hell was going on with her. She started with her breathing and trying to calm her heartbeat. While she lifted her hand up to her shoulders, she pulled it back when it felt something warm and sticky. Then she began to feel it drip down her arm. She knew without looking that it was blood. Her breathing fastened. Her heartbeat increased despite her efforts at trying to calm down. She could feel more blood rivering from her chest and down her thigh. Then she realized the pain was slowly going away. It was spreading from the 3 points and then disappearing. She decided to open her eyes and stop blocking the sound from her ears, as slowly but surely she began to remember. She started with the facts that have always been true, at least within the past 10 years. She was Lorraine Akenthorne. She was a real estate agent and a damn good one. She had never failed a client, and she never had any plan to. She was the oldest of 3, and her youngest sister was dead. Now, to go over today. This morning, she woke up. She finished packing to meet up with her family in London. All had gone smoothly until her flight to NYC was delayed, causing her to just barely make it to the end of the boarding on her flight to Europe. And just as she started to catch her breath, a gunshot fired behind her. When she turned around, and 2 more bullets flew, except these were the ones that ended up in her thigh and her shoulder. A third one landed the final blow in her chest. The last thing she heard were screams. As Lorraine was imagining, or better to say remembering all of this, she realized a very important point. How am I alive? That's when the thought came into full view, the realization hitting her like a 4th bullet. I'm not, she thought as she looked down at her feet to see her own dead body laying lifelessly on the floor. She continued to look around. The gunshots, which were now coming from the 2 sides. One side, the authorities, who were at the exit of security behind a makeshift wall, and the other side, the attackers, also behind a makeshift wall. Except theirs was made out of airport chairs and dead bodies. And the screams, which had stopped either because the people screaming had been shot and are now painting the floor with their blood, or in the body wall, or the less likely option, they got out alive. As Lorraine was just sitting there, taking everything in, she heard something move behind her. She turned around and saw a man she had thought was dead stand up and make a run for a restaurant across the walkway. Lorraine thought he was pretty stupid for moving at all. If he had just stayed there, he probably would have survived. But as she expected, an attacker saw him, and the bullet fired by the attacker landed in the side of the runner's neck. The runner fell to the ground and began choking and coughing, his hands around his neck and quickly turning red. The floor in front of him splattered with his own blood by his coughing. Lorraine turned away, positive she did not want to watch that idiot die. She turned back to the gunfire and noticed that both sides had stopped shooting, and because she had a better view of the attackers, she could see that one of them had lifted up one of the floor tiles and was placing a large thing under it. It's a bomb. Lorraine thought she could see some kind of timer on the top of it, but she wasn't sure. But she was absolutely positive that it was a bomb. Then one of the officers shouted, "Come out with your hands up, we know you're out of ammo." The attackers ignored them and continued with what Lorraine could only assume was a fully planned out plan of action for their attack. What they did next only backed up her theory. Once the tile was properly placed over the bomb, they each brought out a vial of some dark liquid. Then, in unison, they stood up, facing the police, and drank the liquid they were holding. Then, after a few seconds, they all fell over dead. She watched as their souls appeared, and, after a few seconds, disappeared down into the floor. Lorraine wasn't surprised that they went down at all. She judged that the fact that she was still here, obviously dead, and no one else could see her, she was probably a ghost. And that was the explanation she decided to stick with until she found a better one. Soon the authorities realized the shooters were dead and came out from the barrier. Lorraine stood up and was about to tell the police about the bomb under the tile when a rough male voice from behind her said, "Don't try it, they can't hear you." Lorraine jumped and spun around to see an old man. He was short with a small white beard and white hair circling a bald patch on his head. Questions quickly formed in her head, hundreds of them, but she decided the best one to start with would be, "Who are you?" The old man grinned and replied, "The name's Ernie. I died here about 5 years ago now of a heart attack." He paused a second, then continued, "So I've introduced myself, and I suppose it's time I tell you what the other ghosts told me when I died." Ryan hung to those 2 words, other ghosts. She muttered to herself. Ernie must have heard her, because in response he gestured around. As she turned to look, she found that there were other ghosts that had died in the recent attack like her, and talking to each one of them was what she assumed was another ghost. She then turned back to Ernie, who started talking again. "First off, you say the age you died and how. Second off, you can't leave this terminal of the airport. There's an invisible barrier that stops you. Third, just about each ghost gets a haunting ability, either related to how you died or what you did in life. For example, when I walk through someone, I give them immense pain in their heart. Or Ben over there, who choked to death, can make living people around him feel like they can't breathe." "Wait, I have a couple questions before you continue," Lorraine interrupted. "Of course, fire away," Ernie replied. "Oh, but I believe I forgot to catch your name, down to dying 80 years old." "Right. My name's Lorraine, but I go by Lori. And my first question is, does it hurt when a living person walks through you, or when you walk through them?" He paused a second, then replied, "It feels strange and uncomfortable, but I wouldn't say it hurts." Ernie glanced behind her, stopping her before she could ask her next question. "Looks like some sort of detective has arrived, and I say we should go check it out. Your questions and introductions to the other ghosts will happen once everything calms down a bit. But trust me when I say you're going to want to watch this excitement, because you won't see something like this again until someone else dies." Lori nodded, and very slowly Ernie almost waddled over there, and Lori followed. Soon they reached a woman who, almost 30, but Lori thought 30 might be a stretch. She felt 28 or 29 was more accurate. She had hazel hair and light blue eyes, and Lorraine could tell she took her job seriously. As the woman was walking around slowly with a notepad, likely taking note of things she saw or noticed, the next time the woman looked up, she looked directly at Lorraine, and Lori knew she saw her because the woman looked her in the eyes, then quickly saw the bullet hole in Lori's chest and began nervously writing and walking in the opposite direction. "She saw me." Thank you for listening to Chapter 1 of An Airport Tragedy. And if you enjoyed it, please leave a like. And Another thing, if you want to learn more about me, Willow, check out my friend's channel, Elliot Trap. I don't know how to put links to things, but if I can, I will put a link to his channel. But you should definitely check it out. He does a lot of cosplay and other things like that. And fursuits. So I hope you all have a lovely day. Goodbye.